Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 71 of Let's Talk Inclusion. I'm your host, Manobina Chakraborty, and today we are going to discuss an important topic helping neurodivergent young people navigate the transition to adulthood. This stage of life comes with its own set of challenges, and to help us understand it better, we have three fantastic guests joining us today. Let's meet them. We have Dr. Martin Bloomfield and Dr. Venessa Swaby from the UK. Venessa and Martin, you remember last year in March we met in the UNESCO headquarters? And Pallavi Mallick from Dubai. Pallavi is joining us from Dubai. And Pallavi, you also met Martin in a conference, right? In a couple of years ago in Dubai?
Yeah, I met him during November 2023 during BSME conference. Yeah.
Thank you all for being here once again. And before we jump into our discussion, I would love for each one of you to introduce yourselves and share a bit about the work you do. Martin, let's start with you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know what you'd like to know, really. My name's Martin. I'm a director of an organization called Beyond Inclusion, which looks at inclusive practices in education and business. I run a project called Dyslexia Bites, which looks at dyslexia from an intercultural perspective. So I try to get as many different cultural perspectives as I can, which kind of prompted the creation of something called the Dyslexia Map, which is a Google map I've been making of as many dyslexia organizations around the world as I can find. Currently, we've got about 7,000 organizations on there and over 100,000 views, and it's really taken off. And I'm a trustee of the Accessible Learning Foundation. And the Accessible Learning Foundation recognizes the pipeline from school to prison. And we're essentially the plumbers. We're trying to plumb that pipeline from school to prison. So those are the three things. I also lecture in ethics at universities in Europe, Germany, France, and one other country that slipped my mind at the moment.
Thank you, Martin. Thanks for your time. Venessa, could you tell our viewers about yourself and your work?
Okay, so I'm Venessa Swaby, and I run an organization called The Second Voice and at Autism Thrive Services Limited. And that was due to the challenges I experienced with my middle child, Nathaniel, who was diagnosed in 2008, and he's 22 now. And my youngest, it took 10 years for him to get diagnosed. So my perspective is looking at autism as a family perspective, not just the autistic child. And I was diagnosed back in 2022, not something that I will always say to everybody celebrate, because I still have my challenges now as a later mature parent. And I do have many hats, but I'll keep it there for now. Many roles.
So nice. Thank you very much, Venessa. Now, finally, Pallavi, could you share a little about your work and your advocacy for neurodivergent young people?
Hi, everyone. This is me from Dubai. This is almost 16 years in inclusive education, special education for me. And I have been head of inclusion and SENCO in many international schools in Dubai. And I worked with almost all curriculums, be it British, American, IB, and Indian. My philosophy is that I believe in removing barriers, and I just love to work with students and children across ages. And at the end of the day, I feel that this is what is needed in the society, just to embrace our differences and work towards it.
So nice. So rightly said. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Pallavi. Now that we have met our panelists, let's get into the discussion. And viewers, whatever queries you have, please feel free to write them on the comment section. We address your queries for sure. Moving into adulthood is a major shift. And for neurodivergent young people, this transition comes with unique challenges. Based on your experience, what are some of the biggest difficulties they face? This question is open to all of you. Martin, could you start, please?
Yeah, okay. So I think one of the big things that I'd like schools to realize is I'm a great fan of the educational philosophy of a guy called John Dewey. And he once said that education is not preparation for life, education is life itself. And one of the things that schools have got to understand is that there shouldn't have to be a transition from school to life. There should be a smooth process of different activities, but school should be part of the world. The old quotation again, Dewey: "If we teach today's children for our yesterdays, we rob them of their tomorrow." If we think of school as something that's categorically different from everything else, then the challenges of transitioning from one to the other are necessarily going to be greater. So what we need to do is, first of all, we need to help schools understand that there shouldn't be a huge difference between school and outside school. There shouldn't be school and the real world, or university and the real world, as people say. And school should be a preparation for life in itself. So my first piece of advice is simply that. It's simply to recognize that we should break down the walls between education and society.
True. Very, very true. Very true. Pallavi and Vanessa, would you like to add something to it? Whatever.
I think I wanted to say the same thing, because what Dr. Martin said about the school, I think the biggest challenge is when we are in school, it's a protective environment. So, the young adults and students, they don't have the skills ready when they have to go in the outside world, because the outside world is very harsh when you go outside. So I think when you're in a school, you're very protected. You have your teachers, you have your mentors, your learning support department, your parents, and you feel very protected. So when you go out there, you don't have the skills. So I think that is the biggest challenge our learners feel, that from going from, it's like, you have a fish, in an aquarium or in a small, and you're just throwing the fish in the ocean out there, and you don't have the skills how to survive in the ocean out there. I think that's the biggest challenge.
Thank you very much. Vanessa.
Because I'm the last person to answer the question, I would say from my lived experience with my young adults is it's the lack of structured support for post school. I think that most of the time people assume if a young person, say they're in primary school, from what was it Pallavi was saying, it's like they're protected, but once they go into that independence mode, we're still fighting transition. I think professionals still don't understand what transition means. It doesn't just stop in primary school, it happens throughout our life. And I feel that is something that we need to look at, is transitioning into adulthood. It's looking at money management, it's looking at relationships. Because one thing about in the UK, I know we talk about PIP and DLA, if anybody knows what that is, disability living allowance, is we are the parents trying to fight for our young person, our people, when it comes to finances, respite and training. But once they turn 16, we are meant to let our young people learn how to manage their money. But how can they when they've not learned it? So like Martin was saying, there's so much that goes into when our young people get that diagnosis, but then once they turn 16, our voices as parents is lost. So transition is always something that needs to be put in their education, and not just assume that once they turn adults, it finishes. It doesn't, because professionals still need to be educated, because we are not allowed to speak for our young people once they turn 16. And then when they turn 18, 21, 25, we are still fighting for their voices because they don't understand the system. So that's from my perspective as a parent.
May I add to that, to both what Pallavi and Vanessa have just said, which is that unfortunately, schools are structured to climb high in the results. That's what schools are there for, to try to get results. Governments want the schools to get results so that we can rise higher in the PISA league, and this is what the school system's about. What schools should be doing is they should be teaching the skills of transitioning to the children themselves. And it doesn't matter whether these kids are neurodivergent or neurodifferent. It just means that if you like, without the skills of transitioning, and that's transitioning between teachers, because when a teacher changes, the education changes. It's transitioning between classes, it's transitioning between different schools, between one grade and another. It's transitioning from when you're just you start secondary school and then you go on to take your 15, 16-year-old exams. That's the transition you need to make. It's understanding transitioning between friendships as well, because this is something which is huge in the social world. As you get older, you transition between friendships, and this is a skill that kids need to learn. And it's not in the interest of the school to teach that, because it's only in the interest of the school to achieve the grades to do the government's bidding, because the government wants the grades to rise in the international leagues. And so we have a structural issue here.
Yeah, very true. And in our country, in India, I never come across a school who teach these transitioning skills to children. So, and we know that planning ahead makes a huge difference. But when should families start thinking about this transition? And what are the first steps they should take?
Well, I mean, just to answer, it's not for me to say really. My autistic son lives with his mother in Australia, and we're close, and I'm close with his mother, but I don't have the day-to-day challenges that someone like Venessa has, for instance. But I would say it's not we shouldn't think of it in terms of when do you start. It's an ongoing process from early life. And it's about basically helping a child understand different situations and helping a child cope emotionally with different situations and cognitively with different situations. So personally, I think it's an ongoing process, but I would always defer to the parents who are actually doing the job of the parents.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Vanessa, what are your experiences about it?
We've been told, I suppose, when it comes to the educational healthcare plan, it's meant to start at 14. I think it should start younger. Reason being, because as I said, every autistic or neurodivergent person start at different age, at different settings and their goals. And I think it's about identifying what the strengths are, because again, as a parent, we're always fighting for them. And then once, if they have a voice, because I did say to you earlier, not every autistic or neurodivergent have a voice because they can't able to verbalize. So like with me, I had to ask you beforehand, what are you asking me? Usually I'll start getting confused. And again, you got some parents who are undiagnosed and they don't even know how to engage with professionals. So it is very complex. I say it's connecting with other community resources that are out there, other disability services. But again, it's not everybody who claims to be a advocate know what they're supporting. Because again, for some people, it is a lifelong support that we do require. It's not it doesn't end at 16. It's a continuous. I would say start from as early as you can, because you've got some young autistic people, neurodivergent, who can be very articulate at the age of 8 and they know what they want. And then you've got somebody who's 20 who still doesn't know what they want. So we have to be very, not a one size fit all. It's about looking at the individual and making sure that you've got the right resources that are in place for the families that are coming together and the advocates that are being put in place.
Yeah, very true. Early preparations clearly plays a crucial role. And Pallavi, would you like to add something to it?
I mean, like how Vanessa said that one size doesn't fit all. It really depends on where the child or the family is on their journey of, finding the right skills and strategies. So, I mean, it's similar to, as neurotypical or anybody else, like, depending on what skills you have or what skills you lack, it's ongoing depending on, also it depends on how severe the needs are and significant needs are. You can, like, I have the student who has ADHD, but he's amazing, like in doing trading and doing business, and he has more knowledge than me. So in that aspect, he's more mature, he has that financial literacy. Whereas when it comes to social skills or thinking about other people's perspective, he doesn't have. So I think it, we say, one size doesn't fit all, and it's ongoing process. You cannot give it an age and a time. It just like the parents have to really see, and the system really has to see that where do we give that support and how we plan the transition.
Yeah, and when I was working in the UK, I saw at the age of 16, all the young people go for work experiences and under the school's monitoring, but this is not the case in all the countries. not in the countries here in Asia where we are in. But my question is that when it comes to employment, getting a meaningful job is a huge milestone, right? So, what strategies have you found helpful in supporting neurodivergent young people in securing jobs that suit their skills and interests?
So just to say, I've been involved in a project that's coming to its close. Actually, we're writing the reports about the project called the Autism Spectrum Pathways Project, and it's a transnational project funded by the European Union to try to help transition young autistic adults into meaningful and fulfilling and long-term work. And I think Judy Thompson asked a question. I sometimes see the questions coming up, and one of the questions is which country does it best, and what are good techniques. Unfortunately, and I say this with a really heavy heart, from this transnational project, and we looked at something like 8 different countries in Europe, Britain does it best, and Britain doesn't do it very well. And this is the horror of it. One of the things about transitioning, I think there are 2 aspects that I would like to focus on. There's lots of aspects, but for me, 2 aspects. There are structural, what you might call practical aspects, and there are social aspects. So the structural practical aspects of what structures are in place, what help is there. Britain has organizations which provide this kind of help. And they're not too hard to find. The job centre, the employment centre will point you towards them if you ask. But the big thing is social. Because if there isn't an understanding, if there's a stigma of neurodivergence, if there's a stigma about neurodifference, so if people look at autistic people or ADHD people or dyslexic people as somehow broken or somehow frightening, then that's really the barrier to transitioning. One of the really fascinating things that came out of the project was that we interviewed autistic job seekers and we interviewed employers, and we said, we asked them one question: should you come clean? Would you like to? We asked the autistic job seekers, would you be happy coming clean about your autism, talking about your autism? And we asked the employers, would you want the job seekers to talk about their autism? And one of the things we found is that the employers all said, we really want people to say if they're autistic so that we know what to put in place. And almost all the autistic job seekers said, we don't want to because we're frightened of the prejudice. So you've got this friction there between what the employers want and what the autistic job seekers want. And then the prejudice that comes with the knowledge, because it doesn't matter how open the employers are, they will have prejudice. And so it's about trying to break through that prejudice.
Yeah, very true. And Malik, Pallavi, since you have worked with schools in India, UK, and also UAE, this question is for you. As I think education is key in shaping young person's future. How can schools better support neurodivergent students in preparing for higher education or the workforce?
So in most of the departments I have worked, or most of the schools I have worked, we try to have the functional skills program in the senior school. So during the functional skills, I think the life skills which you ask, what is important is to prepare them. We do prepare them. Like these days, this is the hot topic, like financial literacy, how to manage the money. That is really important. That's one of the skills, because now we have so many options that you give a budget and you don't know how to manage it. If you're planning to go outside university, you're staying in UAE and you want to go and study in the UK or in America, you don't know how to financially budget or plan yourself, then it's really hard work. You would not know how to survive then, and that's a life skill which is very important. When we do the functional skills, or like we do the ASDAN program, it's really important to we take them out and see how to use the public transport, or when you're going to the hospital, how would you approach. So I think these life skills are more important than having those academics. Yes, academics is important, but at the same time, how to survive and how to manage yourself on a day-to-day basis is really important. Like I had one of my students who had dyslexia until till now he was a young man and he didn't know, because his birthday was in August, but he would always say that my birthday is on 17th of October. And it was really important to make him understand that you really need to know your date of birth, because if you go you're going through immigration or you're having something else, if your birthday is not right, you will get into problems. So I think these skills, like, we focus on the academics, but functional skills and life skills are really important. And the schools in the UAE and even in India, when I was working in India 15 years back, we had the department in secondary where we would teach this life skills, where we go and visit the stores outside. We would take in Dubai, we would take students for the metro, how to use the public transport, how to use the metro card. These are the life skills which are really important, which we need to embed in our students and have the pupils have those skills to survive out there.
Yeah, ours is a special educational unit within the campus of a mainstream school. So in our unit, we have 70 plus children and young people at present. So we take them outside for these life skills uh, teachings, you can say. So the independent traveling, independently shopping, all these things. Generally, we teach them and we take them out. Also, we have pre-vocational and vocational courses as well. Our young people make jewelry, they do a lot of craft work, they take care of plants so that they can open a nursery in future. They do data entry and hardware and software management, and as well as office management. They go for printing and photocopy and all these things, whatever you need in an office setting. So this way we are doing, but I don't know whether mainstream schools do the same thing in India, because they have uh, population is a big worry in India, and at the same time less job and whatever, a lot of competition is there. So everyone is rather involved in completing the syllabus. So all these things, vocational training and life skills, is not being imparted in all the schools, all the mainstream schools here.
And what you find in India, of course, is that different states in India have different
Yeah.
systems in the schools. So you go to Uttar Pradesh, for instance, and you go to Maharashtra, and they'll have very different outcomes for their schools.
Yeah.
And
Very
also
true.
like in India, you have the private schools and the public schools, and
Public schools,
within
yeah.
and within the private school these days, in the cosmopolitan cities, you have the IB international schools where the fees is really high. So it really depends, But I strongly feel, and with my years of experience working with the schools, the management and leadership, if they believe in inclusion, then things happen. So the leadership has to really believe in inclusivity. The management really has to. If the values flow from top, then things work in any school.
Yeah, very true, very true. Vanessa, would you like to add something to it?
I struggle with the word inclusion, and the reason being from my own experience with the work that I work doing holiday clubs is where everybody says inclusion, but as I said earlier, the families that I work with is the children that I would say they're the lost voices. My son was the lost voice where people didn't want to accept him because of his behavior. Again, he's a different child because I had to work hard. But I think it's going back to your question, is it's making sure that the EHCP within their plan has the goals, because I can look at both of my young adults who are both officially diagnosed with autistic ADHD, and I've got to use that word official, is how going to tribunal where you have got schools who may say that your child's autistic, but they still try to compare them to another autistic child. And then when you're trying to fight the system, they will say, oh, well, they're okay this week. My daughter 2 years ago, she only managed 2 weeks in a London school college, because as far as they were concerned, they didn't read her EHCP. When I went in, they said she was cutting her eye. And this is just show you from my perspective as a Black mother. I said she wasn't cutting your eye. It's the way she looks. The way it looks is that she was cutting her eye. And they turned around and said that she was being aggressive. And then using that word aggressive, I had to say, whoa. Went in the meeting, the teacher actually got up and walked out because she felt I was threatening her. And all I was trying to say, years ago, not understanding being on the phone, I prefer to meet people in the meeting because I struggle on the phone. The teacher found it offensive, thinking that I was indirectly threatening, I was going to come and basically do her in. And I thought, okay, you're looking at the color of my skin. My daughter now, in no education, my son as well, is where I have to still be the voice, even though I've got my own needs. And this is what people don't realize is if you get it wrong in early years, primary school, secondary school, it does go into their college life. So it's making sure that the people that are advocating for our young people understand the family and understand that if the mother or dad may seem a bit difficult, it's not they're being difficult, is they may still struggle with language. And
Yeah.
again, if they got English as a second language coming in the UK, wherever they're working in, some of the professionals don't understand what autism is. As much as they're doing these training, they're not applying it into when they're working with these young people.
Yeah,
Can I add to that, Vanessa? It's I mean, what you said really resonated with me. I mean, there's I often say that everybody is inclusive until it becomes difficult. And it's asking the question of where it becomes difficult. I was talking to a very good specialist in dyslexia in America, and you don't have to have a sort of any academic studies to know that this spreads out into autism and ADHD, possibly especially ADHD, actually. That in America, and this is quite well documented, if you get a child who finds school difficult and pushes back, then if that child has black skin, the chances of that child being adultified, essentially looked upon as a threat, is higher. And therefore, that child is more likely to be thrown out of a class than if they're white. And so what you get immediately is, because you've got these ingrained racial prejudices, which of course we'll have them in the UK as well. If you've got these ingrained racial prejudices, then as soon as, let's say, a black parent starts pushing back, that black parent is being aggressive. If a white person pushes back, they're standing up for their child. And there's just, it's really difficult to get past this.
As well, though, I've always said to people, don't get it twisted, is that I still be challenged by some black professionals because they don't understand autism. So I'm still fighting a system where I've got Asian families who have said, I can't tell my family members that my child is autistic. What do I do? So this is what I always say to anybody, because I was part of the National Autism Training Programme in the UK that ends in March. And well, it ended in February. And one thing I've always said to everybody is that when I walk into a room, you see the colour of my skin. But at the end of the day, I may not still identify with how another black person may have that experience, because my journey has been very unique, because I've had to stand up and say, I experienced the discrimination from all angles because of the fact I look okay. But I've had to say that I will never diss any professional, but to say that if you do meet somebody who doesn't look like you, find somebody that can relate to them instead of making the assumption that they're being aggressive, because that is how I was described. And I know I wasn't being aggressive. I just wanted to ask a question, and it sounded wrong because I didn't say it in the right way. I should have said, in the early days before I got diagnosed, I prefer to have a face-to-face conversation, not on the phone. She took it as an offence that I was coming to threaten her, and I didn't say that. So it's just being careful of the words of how we present ourselves sometimes to make it sound wrong.
yeah. And there are a few questions already been posted on the comment section. Can we take them one by one, and then maybe we will come to our main discussion? So quite a few questions have already been posted. How can families help neurodivergent young people manage anxiety and uncertainty about their future? Who would like to take it? Okay, Vanessa.
Yeah. If I could turn off social media, I'm so sorry. Because I think for a lot of autistic or young people in general, neurodivergent, is social media is their life. You take that away from them, you lose their world. So I would say anxiety for me, when I look at my young people, that's what heightens them, because sometimes if I say something as the parent, we've got to keep it real, we can still get it wrong. So it's picking our battles, because as I said, I would say something to my daughter and she doesn't like, I can tell by her facial expressions now. I've learned to, I'm backing off. But you imagine if you're a parent who doesn't understand what autism is, or if your child is undiagnosed and you're pushing them and they do explode, it's not they're having a mental breakdown. They're probably having a meltdown, shutdown, because you're pushing them. So we just need to understand how we are engaging with our young people, and to make sure what has happened if they are at college or where have they been, how has their day been. And if they can't verbalize, we just have to know that they've got a safe space they can come to with openly and not force them. That's my perspective of how I've worked with my young people.
Yeah. Very true. This is for everybody, actually, whether they are neurotypical or atypical. It's for everybody, for every young people. One more question. What advice do you have for parents who worry about a child's ability to live independently as an adult? Who would like to take it? Martin?
Well, I have nothing more to say than Venessa or Pallavi, but I just want to say that one of the things that I've seen with young autistic people trying to live, if you like, making their first steps to living independently as an adult, what I've seen over and over again, and this is, if you like, observed experience rather than my own experience. So what I've seen over and over again is the notion that what you shouldn't do is you shouldn't have people comparing themselves to an idealized standard that they feel they're not reaching. So there's a very famous video, and you may have seen it, I don't know, on Facebook or YouTube or something, of a sports coach who was saying what you shouldn't be doing is comparing yourself against the fastest people in this race. You should be comparing yourself against the last time that you got, so that you can try to do as well against that. And so it's about how we measure our success and what success means. So for instance, for one person, success may mean being able to boil an egg. That's actually quite a complex thing to do. And the ability to boil an egg without scalding yourself, without burning, without ruining the egg, is quite difficult. And to celebrate the successes and to say, you did really well there. Now let's see if you can do it again. And sort of the parents just helping the people learn how to do these basic skills. And also realizing that we all have to ask for help for all sorts of things. I have to ask for help with loads of stuff. I still ring my mum if I want to know how to bake a cake. There's nothing wrong with that. And so, yeah, I would go with that. First of all, the idea of what success means, I think we should soften that so that people can feel that they have success in what they do.
Yeah, very true. And some more questions. Yes. Are there specific job opportunities or industries that are more inclusive and supportive of neurodivergent individuals? An industry you know about?
I would like to answer that. One of my students, and all the credit goes to the mother, because she really gave her all the skills. The industries which I have seen, and I've seen in India as well, and a lot of hotel industries are employing people with neurodiversity, people with difficulties. I have seen lemon tree hotels; they are very good with their inclusion and diversity hiring. I've seen here as well in the UAE with the inclusion policy. There's a lot going on, and with we call it here students of determination or people with determination. So a lot of hiring and employment opportunities are looking how to make them equipped with the skills. So the trend I have seen is a lot of hotel industries are employing people with differences.
Okay, but do you think these jobs are sustainable?
Then I think we will it's opening a can of worms. It again depends, one size doesn't fit all, so it again depends about your skills and about the needs of those students. Like, going back to what Martin was saying, what does success mean to you? So for this student, just going out of the house and making a travel time from one point to the destination point is a success, while for others, just working in the kitchen or just organizing yourself during the day is a success. So it depends on what skills you have and how you want to advocate it, how the parent wants to go with it. Do you want to get employed? Do you want to open your new? Some of my students have really done well. The parents have equipped them, have made them as entrepreneurs. A lot of my like my previous students with Down syndrome, they have opened their own little cafe or own little, boutique, and just doing that office management or step by step, because that's how you plan, like, just making Maggie or tea shop, a small tea shop, is a success for them. So this is, I going back to one size doesn't fit all for this as well.
True. Vanessa, you'd like to say something?
Just looking back at myself on diagnosis, my background was always around electronics, fixing things, blowing up things as a child. So I ended up working in television, and I like the creative side. And I've noticed a lot of the autistic young people, they do gear towards the creative side, the ones that I've worked with, where it's the digital arts, creative arts, anything to do with iPad. So I try to encourage, for instance, my son always been a gamer from when he was little, even though family members used to try and say, no, he needs to get his education, but they didn't realize he was autistic at the time. But when you look at him now, he can't work now because he broke his arm last year, so he can't do the job. But the college that he worked with engaged, he was plastering. He didn't mind being on his own. But because he's broken his arm, he broke his arm, he's now going back into gaming. So I'm trying to encourage him to get a skill in gaming, because in that way it's something that he does enjoy, even though now he says it's boring, but it's something that I feel any advice to any parent, make sure that what your child is doing, they enjoyed what they're doing, and don't force them to do something. Because I know with my mom, she wanted me to be a doctor. I can't stand bloods, and I can't stand. So I start with technical stuff. I like to do all tech. I'm a techie, so it's investing in your child's interests and not what you want your child to do.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for your advice. There's one more question. Are there any countries or systems who are managing or addressing transitioning well now?
Civic's a major problem across the world. It's not just in the UK. We're still struggling now. My son at 22, he still struggles with transition. If somebody doesn't do it right, he's running back to me and wants me to speak on his behalf. And I still think it's something that, again, I think it needs to start early. It needs to be all plastered everywhere, in every hospital passport, education, EHCP, you name it. Because at the end of the day, without transitioning, it's never going to be a smooth ride for any young person if they struggle in the journey of their life.
And even if you have a company which manages transitioning well, then that company still has to make sure that it's attractive to neurodifferent people. So for instance, if you have a very wordy job advert, dyslexic kids won't read that. If you have a job advert that says, ideally our candidate will have experience in X, Y, and Z, and you get autistic job seekers who don't have that, they're not going to say, oh, well, I'll blag this. They're not going to say, I'll try. They're going to say, I don't have that experience. Generally, people will. I don't have that experience. I won't apply. And so from the very first moment of what a job advert looks like, how it's targeted, how a company presents itself, it doesn't matter whether they can transition you. It doesn't matter whether they've got structures and help and support, because if the neurodivergent job seeker isn't going to go to that company anyway, then it's all for nothing, quite frankly.
Yeah, exactly so. Let us take one more question. How can society and workplaces become more accepting and accommodating of neurodivergent adults? Vanessa? No?
Again, it goes back to that thing. Anybody can do training, but doesn't mean how they're going to implement it. It looks good when they say we're a neurodivergent organization, but you put that person comes in, doesn't mean that you understand that individual. You just have to have that open mind, do the training, but you have to, again, it's back to, as Martin was saying, if you don't ask me something, I'll sit there quietly. I've had to learn for people to get what they want out of me. If not, I'll be that quiet person in the room, and I won't tell people what I do unless you ask me. So again, it's very complex. And I think, again, after COVID, all of a sudden it's like we've become all these special people, when I think we're not special. We just want people to understand that our voices count, but we do need people that understand us, or find out who is in your organization, who is genuine. Because once an autistic person does trust somebody, they'll open up. But if they don't trust you, they're just going to walk away and not say nothing.
It's absolutely true. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just going to add to that. I mean, one of the things that I've noticed is two things. First of all, if I was working with a company and there was a new manager, and this new manager was very open about her mental health problems. And as soon as she started to be open about her mental health problems, so did everybody else in her department. And suddenly the department became friendlier, it became more accepting, it just became a better place to work. And suddenly mental health problems weren't stigmatized anymore. So the first thing is openness. But of course, this requires representation. And so we need to have dyslexic, autistic, ADHD people in positions where they can say, I'm dyslexic, I have ADHD, I'm autistic. So other people can follow suit. Because without the representation, then nobody feels welcomed. Nobody feels as though this is a place for me. And you feel alone. It's terrible to feel alone in any organization. And without that representation, you don't get the openness. And without the openness, you get alienation.
Yeah, very true. I did the same thing last year. Actually, I lead the team of our teachers, psychologists, and therapists in our school. And last year, for some reasons, I was not doing very well, and I had to take anti-anxiety medicines for 8 months or so, and I was under the counseling of a psychiatrist. And I discussed this with my colleagues, and then many of them came out with that, yes, I also don't feel good at times, I feel low and this. And then I remember I sent a colleague of mine to the psychiatrist I used to go to, and now I'm okay. And at present I'm not under any counseling or medication. But yes, when this is a very good point you actually uh, brought up, that there should be an openness in the workplace, and so that no one can feel lonely. And yeah.
And a work environment which is competitive, people don't
Yeah.
want to be open because they're frightened that they will be looked at as though they're somehow
Yeah.
broken. And that's actually the opposite is true, because we're all broken. We're all fallen human beings, every one of us. And
Yes.
yeah.
And but for autistic people, social connections can be difficult, right? Making social connections. So this is very important. So how can parents and educators support young people in building meaningful relationships and improving social skills? Vanessa, would you like to address?
I mean, I do, as I said, most of all the activities that I do, it's all family based, because when I look back at when Nathaniel was younger, it was my daughter's got missed out on a lot of activities, and you can see a lot of resentment. So, but again, as I said, my young people got diagnosed. But when you look at those who are not diagnosed, the loneliness, the isolation, the jealous, they say it's sibling rivalry, is a different type of challenge for that sibling. So I would say social spaces where I try to make sure it's of interest. Sometimes some parents have turned around and said, oh, my child is 12, but we noticed you got it to 5 to 11, can they join? And my response would be, it depends on their, is it age appropriate? Their interest. Because as I said, you got one child, again, as I said, who's 5-year-old, but she may be like a 14-year-old, and you've got a 14-year-old might be like a 4-year-old. And I think this is why I say that word inclusion. People don't understand is when you're providing a service, I do mine through the interest. So at least that way, you know that we're not discriminating. The child who is 12 years old can't come into my group, but I have to address it to the parents to say, look, they don't feel they fit into the older group. Can they come into this group? So I always have to make sure I ask the other parents. And if it's the older ones, 18 plus, again, we won't let the 16, 17s go into the 18 plus, because when it's in the 18 plus, we're looking at sexual health, relationships. We have to talk, again, we don't talk about sex. We don't talk about protecting yourself if you're having relationships. Because parents sometimes say, oh, my child doesn't have sex. And my question is, how do you know? If a young man is, or a young one doing things, you have to have those safe spaces. And that's the sort of, I'm trying to address relationship, money management, cooking, eating healthy. It's not just about, again, Primary school, it's those spaces they don't talk about. Again, I've got young adults that I'm still always having to engage with to make sure that they're still safe.
Yeah. These things make a big difference, of course.
It's a very different, it's not the same as just mainstream. We've got to think very carefully. Friendships, money management, the people they're around, they're not going to exploit them. So if they have got a credit card and they're managing their money, as Martin was speaking about, is just because they may have money, but are they knowing how to keep their PIN numbers safe? Because we do know that a lot of young people who are vulnerable are giving out their PIN numbers, are doing things on social media, and a lot of their parents don't know until it's too late, where it becomes a crime because they weren't able to verbalize it to their parents.
Yeah, exactly. And one more thing is self-advocacy. This is a very important skill for independent living. How can we help neurodivergent young people build confidence in decision making and speaking up for themselves? Martin?
Well, the first thing I would say is that we need to help all neurodivergent, neurodifferent people understand themselves. So it's very difficult to speak up for yourself without a sense of understanding, who you are. There are ways of doing that. So the first thing I'd say is that to link with a question that came up earlier, which we were about to answer, then we swerved in a different direction about emotional management. There are ways of helping people understand their emotions. There are ways of helping people understand their emotional states. Now, there's been a lot of research, or some research done, enough research, let's say, on how certainly dyslexic, but I would say you can easily extend this to autistic and ADHD people. First of all, they feel more than neurotypical people. I hate that word, but they feel more than neurotypical people. There's a greater emotional responsiveness to emotional input. And the second thing is we manage it worse. So we feel more and manage it less, essentially. And one of the ways that we manage it less is the ability to, first of all, to understand and pinpoint that you are feeling something, that you're going through something. Then the ability to name that thing that you're going through. Then the ability to understand how to cope with that thing. And this is a staged process. And we can do this. We can help people do this. A very simple way is just to start working from a young age with things like the wheel of emotions. This is a very, very simple technique.
Yeah, and Martin, please go ahead.
No, so to help people, as it were, to help people understand themselves in that respect, and then to help people understand how they operate in the world. It took me years and years to understand and to be confident enough to say, I can't do this, or I struggle with this, or I need to do it like this. Because if I don't understand it myself, I can't advocate for myself. So there are ways of if you like, mutual observation and people being open with each other and saying, okay, this is what I notice about you, this is what I notice about myself. And until we get that, until we factor that into the way that parents and teachers, if you like, interact with neurodifferent people, then it's very difficult to expect somebody to advocate for themselves if we don't help them know what it is they're advocating for.
Yeah, very true. And transitions can also be emotionally overwhelming. So, what are some practical ways we can support their emotional well being during these major life changes? It's an open question for all of you who would like to take it.
Pin something down, and I think what we got to remember is, and I did say, is that people always seem to talk about the neurodivergent, but we've got to talk about those ones who've got higher needs. And again, it doesn't matter where they are on the spectrum. I would say is to provide alternative communication methods. Again, with my son in particular, my daughter, if you talk too much, say too much, they can shut down. My son is in semi-independent supported housing, and he complains about the fact, and he's not being horrible, but he said, Mum, if somebody's English is not native English, he doesn't understand, he just agrees with what they're saying. So I've had to try to explain to anybody is it's good to put things down in writing, very clear. Visuals, not everybody can read. Again, if they're undiagnosed, they're dyslexic, they don't even know, it's good to have pictures. People overassume just because somebody can read. I know a lot of young people who are dyslexia, and they will say, just because I can read that one sentence, I don't need help. And it's these little things that irritate me when somebody says, oh, we're inclusive. So don't assume just because they can read that one sentence, they can read the whole letter. I would say another one, it's ensuring that the families understand as well. Because again, if the families are not understanding, that can be a blockage where you can have a very good professional who is advocating for the young person. And there's that clash of they don't want to. So you've got to remember as a parent, it's not what you want, it's what the young person wants. Another one, again, decision making is very difficult, as I said, where I've had to always tell my son, you're living on your own now, well, supported housing, you've got staff there. And he says, well, Mum, I don't understand them most of the time. Then he comes to me. So I have to make sure I put everything in an email to break down what he said to me. And I make sure I include him in the email because he can read, he's very able, so that it doesn't mean that I'm twisting what he's said. And if I get it wrong or somebody else get it wrong, it's put in that email thread. So we shouldn't be scared to hear the views of our young people because their voice is just important and not ours. Yeah. They have to learn to get it wrong as well. If they don't get it wrong, how are they going to learn? I would say that from my experience with my young people.
Yeah, this supports her. This can really make difference. Pallavi, would you like to add something to it?
Yeah, I think the first is like Dr. Martin was saying before, emotional regulation. I think that's the skill. First one is really important when we have anxiety these days. So how to regulate our emotions, like have meditation, breathing, journaling. I do that when I get anxious about certain things. I do journaling that gives your clear ideas, your vision, what you're struggling with. Second would be social and communication skills. Seeking support is really important. If you as a young man or as a young girl doesn't know what you're struggling with, you should seek support. We should be openness, like we address this openness, like how Manobina, you shared your experience. If we really seek support, we should go ahead and do that. Third would be self-care and routine management, prioritizing sleep and nutrition. With the social media these days, the sleep cycle is all, it's just haywire. I mean, I have students now who will be having the GCSEs, and we had the mocks. And if you're on social media, you're sleeping really late, you have an exam the next day, definitely you will not be able to manage or remember anything because you've not had those 6 to 7 hours of sleep. Second would be your exercise and movement. That is really important. So with nutrition, you comes your exercise and movement. And third would be structuring, creating your daily structure, creating, organizing yourself. Uh, we have our tools, we have our Outlook calendar when we have the meeting. So whatever is the best way to structure your daily routine, I think that's important. So I think these three skills, emotional regulation, seeking support with social communication, and that self-care and routine, is really important to manage yourself and be successful in life. That goes to everyone, that goes to us as well.
Yeah, this is really. Yeah, Martin, would you like to say something?
Well, I was going to. I mean, just to say what Pallavi said. That's absolutely 100% spot on. These things that you need to manage. I'd only add also hygiene. I think is a big one because this adds to prejudice. If somebody hasn't brushed his teeth, or if somebody hasn't washed for a few days, then they are looked upon in a negative way, and that's such a tragedy because it's a complex skill that we need to learn, and nobody. When you're growing up at school, nobody teaches this, and these are key core skills. And regarding the communication, something Venessa said is so important. I've spoken to a number of autistic people who've each said something very similar to me, and I understand to each other, and I understand what they mean. But taken from the outside, it might sound bad. So they've said, oh, well, this person doesn't speak English very well. And, in a society where we're pluralizing, this can be taken in a very negative way. But it's not negative at all. It's just a trait of autism that they lack clear communication. And so this kind of understanding of what somebody means when they say something is so crucial, because I guarantee if somebody like, and I don't mean to be political, but if somebody like Nigel Farage said this person doesn't speak English, then you'd know where that came from. But if an autistic person says this person doesn't speak clearly, this person doesn't speak English very well, they probably mean something very, very different. They probably mean something that they're craving that communication, and they're craving clarity of communication, and that they're sad that they haven't got it, and they're asking for something usually.
Yeah, exactly. So to wrap things up on a positive note, can any one of you share a success story of a neurodivergent young person who has made a successful transition into adulthood? Yes.
I'm going to say James, and this is not the real name, but I'm going to say James. And James is what you would call obviously autistic, and James has gone through his struggles with the local care plan that the council have tried to defund or underfund his caring, and the people who help him transition. But actually, he's now he exercises regularly. He's got a place in society. He volunteers giving talks, and he started to work. It's voluntary work, but it's work that he's really good at. He loves it. He's actually working in a station, and he loves the routine of the trains, and he's very, very good at explaining to people, and yeah. So it's not his real name, but he struggled in so many of the ways that so many autistic people struggle, and he's got such a wonderful. It's not a wonderful life. He still has his challenges, but he's made a success of so much of what he does by being himself. And I think that's the key thing. He's not now trying to be somebody else. He's saying this is me. My autism means ... If I can say my autism. Autism, my particular manifestations of autism mean that this is how I live life. And he's found a place where that actually is exactly what you need, and he's better at it than other people.
Yeah, such an inspiring story. Venessa and Pallavi, do you have anything to say regarding this?
Okay, I would say my success story is my son, because anybody knows the journey when he was younger, he was written off, how he was described was not nice, and he always remembered what people used to say to him. But putting him in a residential school was something I didn't want to do. He was there for 6 years, to come out with no GCSEs, to end up going back to the school, especially autistic school that he went to, who helped him to gain the trust of going into a mainstream college, and through that he got his functional skills, which he was quite shocked at. And from that, he ended up doing his plastering, even though he broke his arm last year. But he used to say people wrote him off, but he trusted the staff. And through that, even though I didn't get a lot of support from him over the years, even though I do all the work that I do, to end up in semi-supported housing where he could end up living independently on his own, which he thought he would never do, because people used to say to him he would become nothing. And he now says, Mum, I've proved a lot of people wrong. And I said, your voice needs to be heard. And I think anybody sees me on LinkedIn, I do put him out now, because he said he's ready to talk and share his journey, but he does need a lot of support to make sure that he's still protected in many ways.
So nice. Congratulations to you for that. And Martin, Venessa, and Pallavi, thank you for sharing your expertise and experience with us today. And this discussion really highlighted the importance of early planning, strong support system, and access to opportunities for neurodivergent young people. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. Transitioning into adulthood can be challenging, yes, but with the right support and resources, neurodivergent young people can truly thrive. If you found today's episode helpful, don't forget to share and spread awareness. Let's keep working towards a more inclusive world. And to my guests now, do you have any concluding advice to parents who are watching?
Only one thing. only one thing. Don't be embarrassed or ashamed about yourself. That's the one thing I would say. Not one person is the ideal that we're set up against. And so it's just, let's realize that we're all the same. We're all in the same boat. Or as somebody once said, we're all in the same storm, but we're in different boats. Some people have got big yachts and some people have got small dinghies. But not one person in the world is ideal. And don't be embarrassed about the fact that you're different, because absolutely everybody struggles in certain respects.
Yeah. Vanessa, you're
I'll just leave
concluding.
it. I would just say you're not alone. There is a lot of us out there that are making a difference, and just find us. You know, you've seen the four of us, and there's many of us. Just outreach to us. Come on the DMs. We are there to support you. You're not alone.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pallavi.
I would just say the same, that to parents especially, like, don't be embarrassed, don't think that it is a taboo. Be open, seek support, uh, be share the information with the schools. Don't be embarrassed, because you are the parent. You are the first person to be the advocate for your children. So don't be afraid. And once you are there, everything will come along. Once you're open, the openness and the uniqueness is so important. So open spaces, open minds, and this is how life is. Everybody has their own journey, so don't be afraid to seek out that support.
Thank you very much to all three of you for your time and support to iPod Inclusion. And it has been a very enriching experience for me as well. Thank you. Thank you very much, Martin, Vanessa, and Pallavi, for coming here and share your insights. And to our viewers, we will be coming back soon with the 72nd episode of Let's Talk Inclusion. Till then, bye bye and take care.